Hey, Warpugs. So, the Shiv wanted us to check out America's most iconic delivery system, the Grumman LLV, the mail truck. What? I'm used to seeing things about military and war and all this other kind of stuff. But a mail truck? Okay, let's roll. Let's find out about it, guys. FatElectrician.com. Get yourself some shirts. I love this shirt. This is my personal favorite because it coincides with my own slogan. Good times rhyme with war crimes, but it's never a war crime the first time. It's amazing how much that stuff rhymes. In any case, guys, go to FatElectrician.com. Get yourself some shirts. Check out his sponsor list. I'm going to have it in the description below. Get yourself some nice stuff. Let's check this out. I'm about to listen to somebody talk about a mail truck. And it's going to be awesome, and I already know that. Let's go.
Every single time I try to make a funny, lighthearted video, it gets completely unhinged. Today we're talking about Northrop Grumman's most iconic vehicle of all time. Every aviation nerd just sat forward in their chair because if I don't pick their favorite Northrop Grumman plane, they're going to roast me in the comments section. Because if you don't know, Northrop Grumman is a defense contractor primarily known for making warplanes, and they've created some of the most iconic and effective warplanes the world has ever seen.
Yes.
Some of those planes include the F-4F Wildcat, the F-6F Hellcat, America's gun with wings, the A-10 Warthog, the B-21 Stealth Bomber,
yes,
and its replacement, the B-21 Raider. But all of these pale in comparison to Northrop Grumman's most iconic and durable vehicle of all time. A vehicle that was designed to perform its tasks swiftly, despite snow or rain or heat or gloom of night, the LLV, the long life vehicle, aka the mail truck.
You're not serious. You've got to be shitting me.
I shot down 3 MiGs on one of those.
Yeah, the same people that made like half the planes in U.S. military history also made your friendly neighborhood mail truck.
The more you know.
I can only imagine that the U.S. Postal Service put out a memo like, hey, we're looking for a vehicle to help deliver packages, and the U.S. government was like, oh, package, payload, potato, potato, same thing. Call up Northrop Grumman. They're really good at delivering that type of stuff. Okay, Northrop Grumman's used to putting warheads on foreheads. Now they're putting parcels on porches. It's the same thing. Now all I need is for Lockheed Martin to start making action figures, and my life will be complete.
There you go.
Munitions, chips, and toys?
Standard issue is insufficient.
Okay, all jokes aside, I'm actually legitimately upset that this thing is named the LLV. I mean, it's made by Northrop Grumman, the makers of the F-4F Wildcat and the F-6F Hellcat, and you didn't name this the Mail Cat? Are you
I'm a little bit depressed about that too.
fucking kidding me?
Did you forget to do the ad?
No, I did the ad. Thanks for finally being in a YouTube video with a shirt on for once.
You're welcome.
Nice thong, Borat. This video is brought to you by Zydax Custom Gaming PCs. They're all made right here in America with American tech support. They can do any type of customization you want, or they have pre-built ones ready to ship right now. And then we have one of our newest sponsors, Zaka Life Recovery Balm. It's made right here in America, and it's the best thing I've found for aches, pains, and athletic injuries. It blows every other topical treatment I've ever tried out of the water. I'm gonna have both those sponsors and discount codes linked down below. Let's get back to the video.
Let's go.
After finding out that the mail truck that I've grown up with my entire life was actually made by Northrop Grumman, I decided, hey, I'm gonna make a video on this. This is gonna be hilarious. It's gonna be lighthearted. It's gonna be funny. It's gonna be great. So I started looking up the specs. I started looking up the history, how this came to be, and then I asked myself one simple question.
What was
Wait
that?
a minute. Why on earth is a defense contractor making this little tiny car when an automotive contractor probably could have done the same thing better and probably cheaper? And per usual, to absolutely nobody's surprise, it's because once again, the government ruins everything.
Yes, we do.
All right, so let's take it from the top. Once upon a time in 1775, the United States Continental Congress says, hey, delivering mail is super duper important because we don't have email and phones and telegraphs yet, and delivering letters is the only way that we can communicate. So we need to establish a post office, and we're going to take one of our smartest smartest founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, and make him the first postmaster general to figure this entire thing out. Then the government pretty much immediately decides, hey, we want this to kind of be a government agency, but also we don't want to have to give it any tax money to be able to run itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a legal monopoly. We're going to go ahead and say that the U.S. Postal Service is the only entity that is legally allowed to deliver the mail. That way the U.S. Postal Service is going to be guaranteed to get 100% of the business, so they're going to have enough money to be able to fund themselves and not have to rely on taxpayer money. And this is still going on to this day. This is a legally recognized and regulated monopoly. What about FedEx and UPS? That's actually a good question out of you for once. So the monopoly only applies to like letters and mail and shit like that. Packages are technically different and there's allowed to be commercial competition there. That's why UPS and FedEx primarily only deliver packages. Now I say usually because there is an exception that if you have something of vital importance that needs to be like overnighted to somewhere immediately, you are allowed to use FedEx or USPS to ship that if it's of vital importance. And I know what you're thinking, it seems like there's a pretty big gray area there. I mean, who sets the criteria as to whether or not something is important enough to violate the US Postal Service's legal monopoly and be able to use FedEx or UPS to send a letter or an important document? Well, obviously that would be the US Postal Service's in-house federal law enforcement agency, the Postal Inspectors. I'm not shitting you. The mailmen have their own federal law enforcement agency. I had no idea.
Neither did I.
Now, typically the postal inspectors are doing really great things, like making sure that people aren't sending bombs or drugs through the mail, or investigating people that have had their mail stolen, which, if you didn't know, is actually a federal crime. And back in the day in 1775, when the post office and the postal inspectors were founded, Congress levied the death penalty for stealing mail. And while that's all...
Yeah, like, back in the day, like Amazon porch pirates and stuff like that, you'd hit the gallows for that.
All fine and dandy. Once in a while, the postal inspectors get a wild hair in their ass and they decide that they are going to enforce their legalized monopoly. For example, back in 1993, a big company called Equifax was using a private courier to deliver all of their mail, not just their packages. And because of this, the U.S. Postal Inspectors launched an armed raid of their company headquarters, determined that their mail wasn't important enough to be overnighted and that they were legally required to use the United States Postal Service, and then gave them a $30,000 fine. Yeah. If you live in America and you run a business and you decide that you don't like using the United States Postal Service and you're going to exclusively try to use like FedEx or UPS or something, there is a greater than 0% chance that armed mailmen in body armor will show up to your headquarters and raid your business, tell you that's illegal, and then give you a fine. Okay, do I want to talk shit right now because that seems absolutely insane and ridiculous?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit. Am I gonna? Absolutely not, because they know where I live, okay? I didn't know they existed until yesterday. And already Special Forces mailman is on the top of my list of people I'm not gonna fuck with. So everybody kind of already knows that being a mail carrier is a government job, but most people don't understand to the extent that the U.S. Postal Service is its own government entity, so much so that it necessitates its own federal law enforcement agency. So going back to the Grumman mail cat and the actual physical transportation of the mail, it always just kind of went with the times. Back in the 1700s when they were founded, it was delivered on horseback. When cars came out and they became more and more common, the post office began using more and more cars. So the U.S. Postal Service would just acquire whatever cars they needed whenever they needed them, and this went on for decades. But by the 1930s and 1940s, it was becoming a huge issue because the USPS had acquired a ton of different cars. They were all different makes, all different models. They all drove different. They all had different carrying capabilities. They all required different mechanics, different parts. It was a huge logistical nightmare for this enormous fleet of vehicles. As I'm sure you can imagine, it would be like 100 times easier if all of the vehicles in the U.S. postal fleet were the same exact thing and all had the same capability, requiring the same replacement parts, the same type of mechanics, and you could teach all the postal carriers how to drive one vehicle and one vehicle.
I see it now.
Vehicle only. So at the end of World War II, with hundreds of thousands of Americans returning home and looking for jobs, the United States Postal Service recognized a very unique opportunity with the Willys Motor Company Jeep. Because the Jeep was being used by the U.S. military, there was already a ton being manufactured, and a lot of the people returning home from the military already knew how to drive it. There was a ton of people qualified to work on them mechanically, and there was a ton of excess parts around. And with the military downsizing, there was a huge surplus of them, so it was a perfect fit in pretty much every way. It is a rare case of the government doing something 100% right and the United States Postal Service adopted the Jeep as their primary vehicle. And that worked for like 40 years, but as the US got bigger and bigger with more and more people, and people started sending more and more mail and more packages, the capacity that the Jeep could hold simply wasn't enough, and the United States Postal Service wanted something that was capable of carrying more mail. But you have to remember, this is a government agency, and they can't do anything simple when it comes to getting new equipment, so they can't just go over to like Ford or Chevy and be like, hey, build me a new mail truck. No, they have to figure out the exact specifications that they're looking for, and then they have to send it out to all the government contractors so that they can all put a bid in on it.
This is going to get stupid fast. And really stupid fast.
That way the government contractors can come in, do the exact bare minimum, and make a ton of money. I mean, let's just look at the LLV, for example. They wanted this thing to weigh a maximum of 3,000 pounds. Guess how much it weighs? Exactly 3,000 pounds. They wanted it to be able to carry a minimum of 1,000 pounds. Guess how much it can carry? Exactly 1,000 pounds on the dot.
Okay.
They wanted it to be this tall, this wide, this long, and Grumman came along and said, dope, I'm gonna make a metal fucking rectangle exactly that size, throw an engine and some wheels on it, and call it a good day. They literally made a mobile filing cabinet, which, to be fair, in hindsight, after serving in the military, I should have been able to recognize that the mail truck that I grew up with was absolutely a military-grade piece of equipment built by the cheapest bidder. I mean, this is what I drove in the military, the Humvee ambulance, and I mean, the similarities are there. I mean,
yes.
They both look like the blueprints for them were drawn by a third grader that didn't know how to draw a car yet, and then the 3D renderings were made out of fucking Legos. Now, to be fair though, while I have driven the Humvee ambulance and it's a miserable experience, I've never driven a mail truck, so I don't actually know what that's like. So I turned to the internet because surely some mailman has written something somewhere on the planet that is going to tell me what that experience is like, and here's what I found.
Let's
Quote,
go.
regular driving around town was pretty bearable, but driving the LLV on the highway shouldn't even be legal. I've had to do it a few times, and those times were probably the most terrified I've been while operating any motor vehicle. Riding a motorcycle over 100 miles an hour? No problem. Merging onto the highway in a mail truck? You couldn't pay me to do it again. The sluggish acceleration, deafening noise, and harsh vibration were all bad enough. But knowing the body of the vehicle would crush like a soda can in an accident is what made it such a frightening experience.
Hooray.
Nope, I was right, because that is to a T what it's like to drive a military ambulance. I got one of those things going 75 one time thanks to an enormous hill, and it felt like I was re-entering the Earth's atmosphere as everything that wasn't strapped down rattled out of place and started falling to the floorboard. Now, I don't know this for certain, but driving a Humvee or an LLV really fast kind of seems like anal beads, you know? The faster you go, the bumpier it gets, and if you go too fast, there's gonna be shit everywhere.
What did he just say?
That was probably his most poignant analogy that he's ever made that I have heard thus far. I'm disturbed to have heard it, but for some strange reason I understand exactly what he's talking about, and that actually kind of worries me. That actually really worries me.
Brian, this does not seem appropriate to watch in front of the baby.
Now, to be fair to the Grumman male cat, is it a turd? Absolutely, but it is really tough. Because here's some of the testing criteria the LLV had to be able to meet before it would be adopted as the USPS postal vehicle.
Okay.
We have drive 5,760 miles at 55 miles an hour with 0 malfunctions and 0 broken parts. Drive 11,520 miles at 45 miles an hour on gravel with 0 malfunctions and 0 broken parts. Drive 2,880 miles, stopping every 250 feet, accelerating to at least 15 miles an hour in between stops with 0 malfunctions and 0 broken parts. Drive 960 miles on cobblestone, 0 broken parts. Drive 960 miles over potholes, ensuring that every single wheel hits the pothole at least 35,000 times with 0 broken parts. To accomplish that, they took a Chevy S10 chassis, shortened the wheelbase so it could have a tighter turn radius, and then made the entire body of the vehicle out of aluminum so it couldn't rust. So at a minimum, at least it's tough. Despite the fact that it is really tough, it is finally time to start replacing the United States Postal Service carrier vehicle because, well, the engine that they put in these things is an engine from the 1970s known as the Iron Duke, and this bad boy's getting like 9 miles to the gallon. This is the same engine they were putting in the Cavalier and the Trailer Park Ferrari back in the day. I mean, the Pontiac Fiero. Don't laugh, the Pontiac Fiero was high-class white trash, okay?
Yes,
the only thing
was.
cooler than that when I was growing up was the 2002 Dale Earnhardt Edition Monte Carlo. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. The main problem with the LLV
He's not lying.
LLV is the gas mileage, okay? Because it only gets 9 miles to the gallon, you have to realize this is like the biggest fleet of vehicles that the United States has. There's over 140,000 of these things, meaning that for every single penny that gas prices go up, the U.S. Postal Service has to spend an additional $8 million on fuel alone. And this is the part where you're like, oh, America's capitalist, that's fine, that's the cost of doing business, just raise the prices of your services, and it's covered, it's no big deal. You would think that, but remember, the U.S. Postal Service is a government-regulated monopoly, meaning that anytime they want to change their pricing, the government has to sign off on it, and the government takes forever to do anything.
True.
Another example of this would be like the power company, right? Because you can't shop around for different power providers the same way you look for like an internet service provider or a cell phone provider. You only have one power company available where you live, the same way you only have one post office available where you live. Anytime the power company wants to raise their rates, the government has to sign off on it, and it's a huge deal. Same thing applies to the Postal Service and stamps or anything else. Because of this, they can't effectively adapt and change their prices, so it's a humongous issue. So how do we solve this? Well, there's two options. You could A, get rid of the monopoly that's set in place because it's no longer effective for what it was originally supposed to do by helping the USPS, and now it's actually hindering them more than it's helping because they're no longer able to change their prices to actually be competitive. Or you could B, make them get different vehicles. And obviously, we're absolutely 100% of the time going to go with B because the US government, or any government ever really, is never ever going to give up control, and they have control over the USPS, and they're never ever going to let that go. They would rather see that thing burn to the ground than give up control over it. So, obviously, the USPS is getting new vehicles. But then that bites the US Postal Service in the ass because remember, they're a government agency, and they can't just like go to Toyota and be like, hey, Toyota, that new truck that you guys just came out with that's $10,000 and really cool, can we buy a bunch of those for fleet vehicles? No, they can't do that. They have to figure out the specs they want, then they have to send that out and let all these defense contractors bid on them, and then after they bid, they have to give the defense contractors millions of dollars so that they can develop the new vehicle, so they're going to pay for all the R&D up front, and then when Oshkosh Defense wins the bid with this fucking thing that looks like it was animated by Pixar, the other company that they beat is going to turn around and file a lawsuit and sue because they're saying that it wasn't a fair enough competition, despite the fact that the US taxpayers literally gave them all the money for R&D in the first place. And then that's going to delay the whole project more, and then bottom line, it's going to take 20 fucking years to fix the issue. The entire time the US Postal Service is struggling and trying to figure shit out while the government refuses to let them actually do their job and be fucking competitive. And
this is why so many rural carriers drive their own vehicles now.
Just sucks because the U.S. Postal Service is sacred. There's nothing more sacred to society than the mailman. All I wanted to do was have a happy, lighthearted video because I thought it was funny that Northrop Grumman was making mail trucks, and now, after researching it, I'm gonna get upset every time I watch my mail lady deliver the mail because I'm gonna recognize that she's wearing a parka and overalls inside of her vehicle because the heater barely works, because she's driving a 40-year-old mail truck that's a piece of shit because the government fucks up everything they even get near touching. So in conclusion, I guess that's the story of why mail trucks are made by defense contractors, and if you're a mail carrier, I've always appreciated you, but I'm gonna be honest, I have another level of appreciation for what you do, because I truly, genuinely had no idea the levels of bureaucratic bullshit that you had to hurdle on your way to get mail into my mailbox, so thank you. Seriously, thank you. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Whack bang, out.
Oh my god.
You know, the more history I read, the less I trust the government, and maybe, just maybe, that's why in the American education system, they emphasize math and science and English way more than they emphasize history.
Oh! I've got to show this to somebody that I know is a mail carrier just to ask them if they knew this about their glorious little mail truck. And just how crappy it really is. Warpugs. It is so wild. Like, this reminds me so much of some of the 5 issues I've done. I've thought, you know, I'm just going to pick a real simple subject and Just real simple. It's going to be easy. It's going to be quick. And then I get in the middle of it and I'm screaming at myself internally, like, how did you wind up in the middle of this heap of a rabbit hole that you're in the middle of now? Warpugs, I didn't know this much about the mail truck. I'm not sure I needed to know this much about the mail truck. But then again, it does make sense that he is insanely accurate with that statement. Anytime the government gets their paws on anything, they screw it up beyond comprehension. And you can see that in every single facet of life. It is so ridiculous. If you want to see something that's overpriced, doesn't work worth a crap except to the specs it's supposed to work to, just look for any government organization running it. Guys, I'm going to take off from here. I'm going to scream internally for about 30 minutes because this just opened up a whole eggshell in my brain that I'm now going to have to sort through and figure out on my own, crying myself to sleep for a couple of hours. Student loans, housing. Just don't let them touch things. Don't let them touch things. Why do we let them stop? Just back off. Put the cookie down. Warpugs, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that other kind of good stuff. I'm out. I'm going to go cry myself to sleep now, and then I'm going to show it to somebody who's going to get a kick out of it. Because nothing says what in the world am I looking at more than trying to figure out how ridiculous it is to get anything done with the government. I'm out, Warpugs. Don't have the mail cops knocking on your door. That's actually kind of freaky. We have